crown and silence. Immersive audio stories.
Hello again, and a warm welcome once more to this new episode. Today we're going into episode 3, and I hope you will find this very, very interesting. So without further ado, let's go and enjoy chapter 3. At 6 o'clock, a hard metallic clang that echoed through the corridors. The kitchen stopped. As if someone had pulled a hidden string, it was time for the servants' supper. They sat at a long table of rough, scrubbed wood, lit by a single gas lamp that flickered in the draught, casting sharp shadows across their faces. No one leaned back. No one rested their arms. 10 minutes. A bowl of thin potato soup that tasted more of warm water than of anything grown in the earth. A piece of hard bread that had to be soaked or it would crack your teeth. No one spoke. The only sounds were the scrape of spoons against wood and the heavy, silent exhaustion that lay over the table like a layer of soot. When the dinner bell rang for the household upstairs, the entire kitchen changed. The air grew tighter, the movements quieter, as if everyone were carrying an invisible weight they didn't dare put down. Lily was handed the silver trays, heavy, as if filled with more than just food. She carried them along the corridor, arms trembling with exhaustion, and stopped at the polished door where an older housemaid stood waiting. "Eyes on the floor," the woman whispered, without meeting Lily's gaze. Lily handed over the tray without lifting her head. The only things she saw were sharp shoes and a sliver of light spilling from the dining room beyond. Warm, rich, in a way that almost hurt. Then she was back in the kitchen, and the washing up was waiting. A mountain of porcelain and glass, stacked high, as if the house were testing her limits. 86 plates, 42 glasses, and the ice-cold water that bit into her fingers until they bleached to blue and went numb. She scrubbed until she could no longer tell whether she was holding the cloth or whether it was simply slipping between her fingers. When the last plate was in place, the next task was already waiting, without a single word between them. The floors. Lily dropped to her knees with a tiredness that no longer had edges. It was simply there, heavy, pressing down. The stone surface beneath her was as merciless as everything else in this house. She took the brush and began. The coarse bristles dragged across the flagstones with a rasping sound that cut through the silence. The soap water, ice cold and rough, soaked through her dress until the fabric clung to her skin, and the cold crept into her legs like a slow verdict. Her knees ached, her fingers cramped, her arms screamed. But no one watched her, and no one was waiting for her to finish. The last thing that remained were the slop buckets, heavy, unwieldy, reeking. Lily lifted them with arms that could barely carry her own weight anymore. She made her way out through the kitchen door and into the solid darkness behind the house. The air out there was thicker, raw, saturated with damp and the smell of rotting waste. The ground was soft beneath her feet, not like the gravel of the courtyard, more like something that gave way, as if the earth out here had grown accustomed to receiving everything the house didn't want to acknowledge. When she emptied the buckets, she heard it, the quick, dry skittering of small feet in the darkness. Rats. Several. An instinctive shudder shot through her, and she pressed her lips together hard to hold back the sound that wanted out. A small, helpless scream. She held her breath until the sounds disappeared. It was well past 10 o'clock when Mrs. Poole finally grunted at her, a sound more than a sentence. Put out the fire, then up. Lily did as she was told. When the last ember in the range died, and the room fell into heavy half-darkness, she felt the exhaustion drop into her like a hammer blow. The staircase to the attic rose before her like a narrow, steep corridor of darkness. Every step upward felt like climbing a vertical wall. Her legs trembled, her chest burned, her head throbbed in time with her pulse. When she reached the top and stretched for the door handle, the door let out a long, protesting creak, as if it objected to being opened. It was not a room. It was a cell. Narrow, suffocating, as if the house had given her only the space left over after everything else had been accounted for. Perhaps 4 feet wide, 6 feet long. The walls stood so close that the air felt still. The only furniture was a wooden bed, so simple it looked as if it might give way under its own weight. The straw mattress was thin, rough. It smelled of dust and cold. On the wall hung a single iron hook, bent by years of use, waiting, as if it already knew she had only one dress to hang there. At the foot of the bed sat a wooden box without a lock, empty, ready to hold everything she was in the world. The small window bore a long crack, like a white scar straight through the glass. Frost had crept up on the inside, thin white patterns spreading like icy fingers across the pane. She lit the candle stub with fumbling fingers. The flame flickered, as if even it were too tired to stay alive, and cast a yellow, feeble light across the room. Lily sank onto the edge of the bed. It was not a movement. It was a fall, as if her body were finally doing what it had wanted to do for hours. Her hands were shaking, uncontrollably, not from cold, from an exhaustion that had worked its way into every joint, every muscle. Her fingers stung, the skin raw, as if it had been scraped away. Her knees throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. It felt as if her entire body were crying out for rest. But the voice was so faint that even she herself could not hear it. Then she froze. The air stopped in her chest, as if something cold had settled over her. A sound. Low, muffled, but distinct against the silence. Footsteps in the attic corridor. Not Mrs. Hargreaves' quick, irritated stride. Not the other maid's nervous tiptoeing. These steps were slow, heavy, as if whoever walked did not need to hurry, as if time belonged to him. One step, another. Then nothing. The steps had stopped, directly outside her door. Lily lay motionless in the straw mattress, her body tensed to the point of breaking, her heartbeat hard, solitary, like blows against a cold wall. She didn't dare breathe, and in the heavy silence, she felt it, that ice-cold certainty that someone was standing out there, listening to her breathing, to her fear. She blew out the candle. The flame died with one last tremor, like a sigh in the small room. The darkness closed around her instantly, thick, compact, as if the walls crept closer when no one could see. Through the crack in the window, the wind slipped in, a thin, plaintive sound, like a distant breath, cold enough to crawl beneath the skin. And only then, in the total darkness, the tears came. Not in an outpouring, not in a storm, just quiet, hot, burning drops that found their own paths down her cold cheeks. She saw her mother before her, in the dim room on Thrall Street, alone, coughing, waiting for money that would barely stretch to coal. And she saw Lord Harrington's eyes, dark, penetrating, not angry, not kind, just measuring, like a knife held up to the light to see how well it cuts. The clock in the corridor struck 5, iron against silence. Each stroke cut through her like a cold blade. Lily's eyes snapped open in the solid darkness. She had not slept, only lain there, rigid with cold and fear. The chill of the straw mattress had crept up through her legs until they felt like wood. She drew in the cold, ash-heavy air and sat up. The dress she put on was the same as the day before, now stiff with dried dishwater, sweat, grease, like armor made of poverty. There was no time to wash her face, no time to comb her hair. The work was waiting, as relentless as the morning bell. It was 1 minute to 5 when she was already standing in the scullery. She lit the stoves. The flames leapt up like hungry tongues. The coal bucket was so heavy she nearly lost her balance lifting it. She pumped the water. The stream that came out was ice cold, a shock that went straight through her fingers and left them white and numb. Then she began on the night's pots. Sand, vinegar, ash. The mixture burned, and every stroke of the brush sent a sharp pain through her already open wounds. The grit tore at her skin as if trying to get beneath it. Just after 6, the door flew open so hard that the draught made the flame on the range tremble. Mrs. Hargreaves stormed in. Her hat sat crooked. Her eyes gleamed with an anger that looked almost personal.
Girl, come with me, now.
Lily dropped the scrubbing brush. Dirty water splashed up across her apron like cold blows.
What has happened, Mrs.?
One of the housemaids is down with fever. You're stepping in. Move. The Lord is in his study. He wants coffee and a biscuit.
Her voice hardened.
Do not embarrass me.
Lily wiped her bleeding hands against her apron. Her heart beat hard, almost too loud in the narrow silence. The upper floor, forbidden ground. They took the servants' staircase, the narrow, creaking, damp-smelling passage that wound upward like an old wound in the house. The smell of mold lay thick, and every step rang hollow, as if the staircase itself were bearing witness. Mrs. Hargreaves walked ahead, her steps quick, sharp. They sounded like whip cracks against the stone.
Keep your eyes down. You speak only if spoken to. No sounds, no mistakes.
Mrs. Hargreaves stopped at a heavy oak door and knocked once. A low, "Come in." The door swung open, and Lily lost her breath. The room that opened before her was enormous, so vast it felt like another world entirely compared to the cramped stone passages below. The walls were paneled in dark, polished oak that caught the light from the open fireplace and threw it back in deep red tones. The smell hit her immediately. Leather, sweet tobacco, a note of iron, and something else, something she couldn't name, but felt in her chest. Power. On the massive desk lay papers in neat stacks, a seal of darkened metal, and, open in a leather case, a revolver. Resting there as if it had every right to be. Lord Harrington sat at the desk, leaning back in a morning robe of dark silk that caught the light in soft folds. His hair disheveled, as if he had only just risen from bed. But his eyes carried not a trace of sleep. They were cold, alert, penetrating in a way that made the room feel smaller. When she stepped in, he raised his gaze, and it fixed on her like a snare. Not loud, not threatening, just absolute. Coffee. And a biscuit. The voice was calm, almost soft, but the undertone of impatience was so clear that Lily flinched as if someone had shoved her forward. She tried to curtsy, but the movement came out clumsy, jerky. Her hands were shaking so hard that the silver tray rattled, a thin metallic sound that felt far too loud in the silent room. On the tray sat the coffee pot, dark, hot, its scent strong as a warning, and the golden biscuit gleaming with butter, the porcelain so thin it looked as if it might crack from her gaze alone. She lifted the pot. Her fingers no longer obeyed her. The coffee swayed against the rim, a dark wave threatening to spill over. One drop fell, a dark mark on the white saucer. Silence. The kind of silence that didn't merely fill the room. It waited. Lord Harrington let his gaze rest on that single drop. His eyes narrowed. Not much, just enough for the air in the room to contract. "You are the new girl, from London." It did not sound like a question. "Whitechapel, if I recall correctly." Lily swallowed hard. Her mouth was dry as ash.
Yes, my lord.
His gaze lifted from the cup and found her face again. Calm, unrelenting. "You know what happens if you spill again?"
Yes, my lord.
"Good." He took a bite of the biscuit, chewed slowly, methodically. He was not looking at the biscuit. He was looking at her. His gaze moved over her without hurry. the dirty dress, the damp hair clinging to her temple, the trembling hands she was trying to still, but couldn't control. The silence stretched out, thin, taut. Then he said, quietly, clearly, "You have fine hands, despite the dirt." Lily froze, as if the air around her had solidified. All the blood seemed to drain from her head, leaving her empty, dizzy. She pulled her hands back instinctively, hiding them in the folds of her apron, as if his words had burned the skin.
Thank you, my lord.
The words were barely audible. In the doorway stood Mrs. Hargreaves, a dark silhouette, her face immovable, a hard mask of restrained fury. "Back to the scullery," she said, her voice pressed to a thin line. "Now." Lily needed no further order. She curtsied quickly and backed out of the room, as if the air inside had become dangerous to breathe. The moment the door closed behind her, something inside her broke, and she threw herself down the narrow servants' staircase. The steps were slick with wear and dust. She pressed her hand against the wall to keep from falling. Her heart hammered, fast, hard, a trapped drum beating against her ribs, making it difficult to draw breath. She had barely stepped over the threshold of the scullery when Mrs. Hargreaves was upon her. The housekeeper seized her arm, hard, fingers like iron claws boring through the fabric and into the skin.
What did he say?
The voice was low, but knife-sharp.
Nothing important, Mrs.
Do not lie to me, girl.
Lily dropped her gaze to the stone floor. The heat rushed into her cheeks, burning like shame.
He said I have fine hands.
The grip on her arm tightened for one moment, as if the housekeeper were weighing something inside herself, and then released, abruptly. Lily staggered backward, caught herself against the sink.
Stay away from him,
said Mrs. Hargreaves. The voice had changed. It was no longer hard, just low, almost trembling, as if the words were coming from somewhere she herself didn't want to touch.
He sees what he wants, and he takes it.
Hey, hello again. Now, starting to be more tension and more interesting, I hope. So if you like what you see, please subscribe and leave a comment, or support the channel in any way. Now we have to wait until next month before new episodes arrive. So take care and see you.
Hark the weight of gilded crowns and the power of unspoken words.
Crown!